Welcome into the final off-season edition of the Braves Clubhouse Report here on your home of the Braves, the Fan 680 and 93.7 FM. Alongside Wiley Ballard, Kevin McAlpin here with you till the bottom of the hour as it is now opening day eve. Braves in the nation's capital, and they will kick off the 2023 regular season tomorrow, 1:05 Eastern, right here on the Fan, the 680 The Fan mobile app, and of course the Atlanta Braves radio network. And Wiley, I don't know about you, man, this is going to be my 20th opening day working in Major League Baseball, and every year I get the same feeling. You go to bed, you toss and turn all night. We know that it's just 1 out of 162, but man, there's nothing better than opening day in Major League Baseball.
No chance. You can't beat it. And look, I don't care if you're projected like the Rockies to be the worst team in Major League Baseball. It's still exciting when you get a chance. But I'd be lying to you if this opening day feels a little different than the ones we had in the mid-2010s when the expectations were a little lower.
Yeah.
I know the Braves have won 5 straight division titles. What I think has me most excited is I think you can make a case that this could be the best team that the Braves have had in this 5-6 year run, just given all the dominoes that seem to be falling into place from a health standpoint offensively. Acuna looks good to go. Ozzie Albies is healthy. You feel good about Eddie Rosario coming back. You just added Sean Murphy. So offensively, you got a chance to be just as good as you have been. You've been one of the best offenses in all of Major League Baseball. And on the mound, I know you wish you had the services of Kyle Wright out of the gate, but you still have Max Fried, Spencer Strider. You'd be hard-pressed to find a better 1-2 punch in Major League Baseball. There are some that stack up pretty well, no doubt. But I'd take Fried and Strider as much as I'd take anybody else.
Yeah, no question. Going back to your initial point, you mentioned hope springs eternal for 30 teams, and it's probably closer to maybe 15 to 20 that have realistic expectations. But part of the fun when you play a 6-month marathon season, you'll see teams you didn't expect. Go back to last season. Nobody thought the Baltimore Orioles were going to make things interesting in the final month of the season, but there they were. And so that's the fun is trying to figure out what are those 1 or 2 surprise teams that may pop on the radar. The team we've talked a lot about is the Angels. Could this be the year with Ohtani and Trout? Could they finally be a team that gets into the postseason? I don't think they have enough, but what I'm getting at is there's always 1 or 2 teams that sort of come out of seemingly nowhere, and that to me is what makes baseball such a fun sport to follow all summer long.
I remember being told when I was in college working in the press box and just sort of picking the brains of guys who've been around for a while, and they always made the point that baseball is like the soap opera version of sports television because there's something new every day. There's always new development. And, I was going back reviewing last year, and 12 months ago, the names Michael Harris was certainly not on the radar as far as contributing in 2023 at the level he did, winning Rookie of the Year. Spencer Strider was an exciting piece. It was a big breakout there in spring training, but you still weren't quite sure what you were going to get with him. And those 2 guys really were the story of the season. You go back to May 30th, Strider makes his first start. A few days earlier, Michael Harris makes his Major League debut, and boom, the Braves are off and rolling. So I'm excited to see, maybe a guy like Jared Schuster or Dylan Dodd. I'm not saying anybody's going to be Spencer Strider. Maybe they're one of the stories that, hey, you didn't see that coming, when everybody reported in Northport for spring training.
Let's be honest. I don't think Jared Schuster or Dylan Dodd expected to be in that conversation either, but here they are. We know that whether it's underperformance, C. Ian Anderson, Bryce Elder going back to AAA as well, or Michael Soroka, who really, we've seen him once in Grapefruit League play for a couple of innings, but that's it. So by necessity, these 2 guys now are getting thrown into the fold, and based on what their spring training numbers are, and look, I don't get overly wrapped up in spring training numbers. It's easy to do because you can get fooled very quickly down there. But when it comes to Dylan Dodd, 5 appearances, 18 innings, 15 hits, 4 earned runs, 20 strikeouts in 18 innings. And then for Schuster, strikes out 19 and 20 and 2/3. So both of these guys certainly rising their game up to that competition. And it felt like they were not only pushing each other, but feeding off each other as well.
Well, in my mind, it just continues to, I think, one of the most underrated stories for this organization, in the time since they've started winning those division championships, that 2020 draft just continues to deliver again and again. And I know Jared Schuster was at the top of that class in 2020, and he's going to make his debut this week. You've already gotten Spencer Strider out of that class. You've already gotten Bryce Elder out of that class. And I look back at just one thing you have to do once you start making the playoffs like the Braves did in 2018 and 2019 is continuing to draft well despite not picking at the top of the draft. And that 2020 draft was a group that I don't think anybody in the industry felt really comfortable about evaluating some of those guys because you couldn't go out and see them. I mean, the season just stopped 4 months before the draft began. And therefore, to get the value the Braves have gotten out of that draft with Strider, Schuster, and Bryce Elder as well, that to me is one of the reasons why this team has been able to sustain it. And Schuster's got the pedigree. I mean, I know the velocity isn't overwhelming like Spencer Strider, but he's got a solid 3 pitches, and this is a guy I think that the Braves organization feels pretty comfortable in. Dylan Dodd to me is almost a more interesting story just because it really wasn't as high on the radar. I think the highest he was rated in the Braves system was their 6th best prospect, and even some others had him rated lower than that. He was a late draft pick, not really considered a big part of the future, but he's just continued to compete in spring training. Like you said, you don't want to read too much into the spring training numbers. I get that, but this is a guy who was well aware those last couple of weeks that, hey, I'm competing for a chance to be in the big leagues. And I felt like he did a pretty good job of that. So as far as the pressure, I think he's already encountered some of that here in the back end of spring training.
Yeah, no question. So we'll get a chance to see both those guys. As far as the rest of the rotation is concerned, the worst kept secret in all of Braves land has been Max Fried starting his 3rd consecutive opening day. We knew that was all but a formality when the team got down to Northport. And then Spencer Strider coming off a Rookie of the Year runner-up finish in 2022, 202 strikeouts, 130 innings. We know the numbers that he put up. But after that, in that first week of the season, again, no Kyle Wright. So you're looking, okay, you got Charlie Morton, Jared Schuster, and Dylan Dodd. Go get them. And the one thing to keep an eye on, I think, as this season gets rolling, you don't have the luxury of all those off days early on. Remember, in years past, you'd play a game, get a day off, play 2 more, get another day off. It seemed like the first 2 weeks of the season, you had 5 days off. You don't have that luxury now. So this is not just going to be one start for Dodd, one start for Schuster. You're going to need them a couple times through this rotation.
I think you're right, especially given the comments you heard from Brian Snitker when it came to Kyle Wright. I think for Atlanta, when it comes to Wright, Brian Snitker's pretty clear. They didn't want him playing catch-up. They're going to be very cautious because once they give him the green light, they want him to be there the rest of the season. So that means if you got to tread water with a guy like Dylan Dodd or Jared Schuster here these next few weeks, I think Atlanta's willing to do that.
Yeah.
And then I'd also mix in the fact that from a closing standpoint, Raisel Iglesias not being 100%, a little bit of a concern. I love Kirby Yates' resume. Can he come back and be a part of that bullpen? I don't know. But I do feel really good about A.J. Minter as he steps into that closer's role. I think that's the expectation across, is that he'll be the one to get the first crack at it.
Yeah, the good news is that as far as the injury bug is concerned, it doesn't sound like Kyle Wright's going to be too far off. He might miss a start or 2 into the regular season. We don't really know about Iglesias, but it didn't sound like, at least as of a few days ago, this was going to be a lengthy stay on the IL. So the good news is you have the depth there, right? You have A.J. Minter, who has come such a long way in the last few years. Colin McHugh, Dylan Lee, Kirby Yates. You do have guys that can cover those innings late in ball games. So while it's not ideal, if you have to get it out of the way, get it out of the way now, especially when you're opening up against a team like Washington.
Well, and 2 things to that. One, that was best season of his career. I mean, especially if you don't count 2020, which is a 2-month span. But for sustained success, 2022 ERA just a shade over 2, a strikeout ratio of 6-1. He really feels like he's comfortable in that role. And I remember years ago, when he was coming up to the minor leagues, the thought was he could be the closer of the future for this team. And I think clearly he's been an indispensable part of the bullpen so far. But I bet he's excited. I mean, I know he wants Raisel to get back and healthy, but I bet AJ's excited to have a chance to sort of be the guy. After Kenley Jansen came in, led the National League in saves last year, Raisel Iglesias seemed to be the incumbent, and I think still, regardless of if AJ has success in that role or not, Iglesias will still have plenty of chances to save some games for Atlanta. But that's part 1 is A.J. Minter. Part 2 for me is that the offense, again, I think that's where you can see a lot of improvements on this team. I think Ronald Acuna Jr. being healthy, Ozzie Albies being healthy. I think year 2 for Matt Olson is going to be easier than year 1 because, remember just all the stuff going on with Freddie Freeman, Matt coming home to his hometown. Pressure could not have been higher on him. Eddie Rosario feel like he can see again, and I know spring training stats, so on and so forth, but he homered twice in the last couple of days. He's feeling good, if nothing else. If you believe confidence is a part of baseball, Eddie Rosario's got some of that right now. And then the question I have as well, and I know we're bouncing around everywhere here, but what can Charlie Morton give you?
Yeah.
Because I look back at the start of last season, first 12 starts, ERA over 5.5. The next 14, it was below 3. I mean, he found his groove, but I think that leg injury he suffered in the World Series might have delayed some of his off-season work and getting ready for the 2022 season. I feel like he's in a better place from a routine and preparation standpoint entering this opening day than he was a year ago.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that all the guys that didn't have normal off seasons a year ago are in such a better place coming into the regular season, just having the ability to have a normal off season, to work with team trainers, to have that downtime as well. Because also keep in mind, when you're coming off a World Series title, you're playing into November, right?
Oh, yeah.
And your off season, I have a neighbor who works for the team, and he said, we're 5 weeks behind where we need to be. I said, the parade was yesterday. He goes, yeah, but we got to sign minor league free agents. We got to do X, Y, and Z that has already happened by now, but we're still playing. So what I'm getting at is the off season was funky enough, and then you come into it with the lockout, and there was just so many things going on. So I'm with you. I'm really encouraged about what we saw from Acuna in the World Baseball Classic. Ozzie, his left-handed swing looks really, really good. And then Matt Olson, I'm just going to say it right now on, March 29th. I think Matt Olson could be right there in the conversation for an MVP award this year.
And we haven't even mentioned Austin Riley.
Oh, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I'm with you. I think Matt is poised to have a huge year. And, I'll also say this, you talked about the injuries, and look, like you said, it doesn't feel like Kyle Wright's going to be a long-term thing. Same story with Raisel Iglesias. You look at some of the other teams in the division, you already know Edwin Diaz is out for the year.
Yeah.
Reese Hoskins out for the year.
Which is awful to see the way that thing happened in Philly. That was awful.
Yeah, and again, as much as you want to beat the Phillies, it's more fun to beat them at full strength,
sure.
right? So, having said that, to your point about the World Series run, putting things behind, the Phillies are kind of, and let me, before I go any further, that's a good problem to have. You want to get to the World Series. I'm not suggesting that, good thing the Braves didn't beat the Phillies in that postseason series. But, that run delayed Harper's offseason surgery, and I know there's a lot of speculation that he might be coming back as soon as late May. And who knows? We'll see. I mean, you look at the guy's injury track record, whatever the estimate is for a normal person, he usually beats it by about 25%.
Yeah.
So he's, in some ways superhuman, which I guess is the case for a lot of these major league players.
Yeah.
But, the Braves, from an injury standpoint, I'd make a case. They've actually made it out better of spring training, even with Iglesias going down and Wright not being 100% and Soroka's with the hamstring. If you compare what the Mets and Phillies are dealing with, I think you could argue the Braves actually are the ones that are in the best position from a health standpoint.
Yeah, and depth is certainly tested. We know that that's going to happen throughout the long season, and it seems like so far the Braves' depth has been there where, okay, look, they're relative unknowns in Schuster and Dodd. I'm not going to proclaim to be an expert on both of these young guys because I've never laid eyes on them in person. But what I'm saying is you feel like, okay, you've lost your closer, but you got 2 or 3 guys you feel like you can trust in there for a short period of time. You've got some young kids who had really good springs. You're going to put them in the rotation as well. So you need that depth. It's going to be tested. It's been tested early, and so far the Braves have checked those boxes.
Well, and I'm at the point, and I think there are others in the industry beyond Atlanta and beyond the Braves organization that feel this way. You look at the players the Braves have introduced from the minor leagues over the last couple of years. Michael Harris, Spencer Strider. I know Von Grissom defensively still has some work to do, but man, offensively, he looked like he was ready. The Braves have a reputation across the industry of being some of the best at getting their players ready to contribute and perform. I mean, look in Seattle. Jared Kelenic was supposed to be the can't-miss guy. They've tried to bring him up a couple times. It hasn't worked.
Right.
Brett Beatty had a little bit of a rocky start for the Mets there when he made his debut. I think that it's one thing to have prospects with talent. It's another to get them ready to contribute immediately at the major league level. And the Braves' track record in the Alex Anthopoulos era is that when they bring a guy, take him out of the box and say, here you are in the major leagues, more times than not, that guy's been ready not only to play at this level, but to be an impactful player at this level. So with that in mind, Schuster, Dodd, to me, I kind of am ready to give Alex Anthopoulos the benefit of the doubt to where those guys, again, I'm not suggesting Spencer Strider. I mean, you're talking about the guy who set the major league record for quickest 200 strikeouts in a season last year. But there's no reason for me to feel like, why can't Jared Schuster and Dylan Dodd be just as good as another team's 4th or 5th starters?
And Alex will tell you it's a testament to the hard work those guys do on the development side, single A ball, double A ball, getting these guys prepared mentally and physically for the grind of a major league season. So that can't be underestimated as well, how hard those guys work down there on the farm. And these guys have all been really impactful in a very short period of time. All right, we got lots more to get to. We'll step aside for a quick break. On the other side, we'll talk more about the Nationals. Going to be a tough season in Washington. We'll tell you more about the Braves' first opponent coming up next on the Braves Clubhouse Report here on The Fan. Well, Wiley, they'll be seeing a Nationals club that's a little under 4 years removed from a World Series title, but you'd never really know it looking at their roster. And they're going to give the ball to Patrick Corbin. That'll be the Braves' first opponent on the mound. And Wiley, all he's done the last 2 years is lead the National League in losses. So that kind of tells you where Washington is right now. He's making a lot of money, but boy, it has been a rough go in the nation's capital for the veteran left-hander the last few years.
You look at DC and the Nats and the contracts they have done with those players from that 2019 World Series and the guys they did not extend, and it's been a little bit of pretty much the exact opposite of what you wanted to do. Steven Strasburg hasn't been healthy. He got the big contract. Patrick Corbin hasn't been healthy, and my understanding he got that big contract, I think, going into that World Series year. So I don't think you can sit there and say it was a bad contract because he was really a huge part of about the 5 pitchers they trusted in that World Series run. They basically had 3 starters and 2 relievers, and that was it. It was a very thin staff that was able to get them that World Series win. So I don't think Patrick Corbin deserves to be totally raked over the coals in D.C., but, man, it has been rough the last couple of years. And truthfully, I mean, look, opening day is opening day, and that's exciting, but I'm curious to see what D.C. or the Nats starters look like on game 2 and game 3.
Yeah.
Because you're basically looking at the 2 guys that were part of those trades, Josiah Gray coming back in the Trey Turner deal, and then with the Dodgers, and then Mackenzie Gore, part of the Juan Soto deal. I mean, those are sort of the two of the big pieces they got in those deals, and they're in their opening weekend rotation to start this year. So if you're looking at the future of the Nats, I think you get a pretty good look at it with their starters on Saturday and Sunday. And then offensively, love Joey Meneses, man. That guy's a cool story. Huge World Baseball Classic. He's a minor league lifer who exploded on the season last year. Beyond that, not a whole lot to be excited about if you're a Nationals fan. I mean, I guess C.J. Abrams is interesting. I know Carter Keyboom's a local kid who's been bouncing up and down, and he's another prime example. We were talking about the last segment, Kevin, of a guy who's supposed to come out of the box from the minor leagues and be ready to go, and he hasn't stuck, much like Jared Kelenic. Again, I just commend the Braves. You have these guys who are highly thought of from a prospect standpoint, and once they get to the big leagues, they deliver, and that hasn't been the case in other organizations.
No, it hasn't. And I think Mackenzie Gore's got a chance to be good down the road, but still a very much unproven commodity there for the Washington Nationals. By the way, since Strasburg won that World Series MVP in 2019, he's appeared in just 31 1/3 innings from 2020 through 2022, and that was after he signed that $245 million deal. And look, you hate it for a guy who, when he was on, he was one of the top pitchers in all of Major League Baseball. Go back to 2012. I remember he had the big seasons in 16, 17. But, again, you hate it. Like we talked about for Rhys Hoskins, from a competitive standpoint, you want to face some of the better ones there is. And it seemed like every time the Braves dialed up Strasburg, they had a really good game plan against him somehow.
I'll tell you what, I was in the stands his first start in Atlanta, which I guess would have been about 12, 13 years ago now. It was hot, and Strasburg to that point, I don't think he had lost a game. And, ever since then, he has just not felt all that comfortable in Atlanta and the humidity and all those sorts of things. But I couldn't agree with you more. Pitchers, I mean, they get hurt. That's what happens. And I think that's why Atlanta deserves a lot of credit for finding a way to lock down all these position players, because, you look at what the Nationals did, and, they've got the long contracts with guys like Patrick Corbin and Steven Strasburg who have either gotten hurt or all of a sudden not been who they were. Whereas Atlanta has locked up, most of their great hitters. I mean, obviously the exceptions there, Freddie Freeman, Dansby Swanson, but I think you look at those guys and they were a little too far down the line, too close to free agency to get, find a mutual point of agreement when it came to salary and those types of things. But, I look at what the Astros are doing. They're trying to follow the Braves blueprint, which is no surprise because Dana Brown, who was the director of amateur scouting and ran the draft for Atlanta the last couple of years, is now the Astros GM. They're trying to extend their young hitters. And so Atlanta, again, the whole structure of Major League Baseball, it is designed to where when you get good, it's hard to stay good. Yeah. And the only way you stay good is shouting out the guys you shout out in the last segment. It's your development guys. It's your amateur scouts, and it's finding a way, how do we keep bringing in talent in the organization when you're not picking at the top of the draft? You don't have as much draft capital, and you've had to trade off some of your better prospects to bring in guys like Matt Olson and Sean Murphy.
And think about this, too, as we compare rosters. The Washington Nationals payroll is a little over $101 million this year. 35 of that's going to Steven Strasburg, who I haven't heard a thing about. We don't know what he's even doing, if he's doing any kind of baseball activity. Patrick Corbin's at $24.4 million. So half of your payroll more than half of your payroll is tied up into two pitchers. That's another thing that I think the Braves need to be commended on, is that the guys that they've locked up, they're not hamstrung where they don't have deals that are not movable, but also going to tie it up where you can't build a roster around it. And again, I think you strike early. You get the Michael Harrises and the Spencer Striders and Ozzie Albies, Ronald Acuna. You lock those up. And while some will say other team-friendly deals, it's not fair. It's a smart way to do business. And I think looking at the Nationals salary, it goes to show you just how drastic a difference there is between these two clubs.
And I know we touched on it earlier, but I mean, really, this series this weekend is just the starkest contrast imaginable between two teams that have won World Series and how one team has done everything right since then, and the other team has really struggled to find a way to keep that core together. I mean, look at the lineup that the Nationals had in 2019. Juan Soto, Trey Turner, Anthony Rendon. None of those guys are there because they didn't have the money or didn't feel like they wanted to invest the resources, and I'm sure there's a bunch of different sides to that story.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is they couldn't keep it together.
Yeah.
Atlanta has it all together, and that's why we're sitting here thinking they're maybe not the favorite to win the World Series, but they got as good a shot as anybody.
Yeah, they're right up there. Vegas looks at them at 95.5 wins over under, and that's 2 to 3 wins more than they're given credit for the New York Mets. So be very interesting. This division will be certainly one to follow throughout the next 6 months, and we're happy to bring it to you right here on The Fan. All right, on the other side, we'll get Wiley's thoughts on the new jerseys. Yeah, did you see the City Connect jerseys? They came out the other day. We'll talk about that, and we'll turn things over to Chuck and Chernoff as we wrap up the Braves Clubhouse Report here on The Fan. Segment of the Braves Clubhouse Report. This time tomorrow, hopefully we're in about the 4th or 5th inning. Braves have a good lead as they kick off the regular season in our nation's capital.
We'll talk 5th inning.
Maybe 6th.
We're going to be in the 7th.
Oh, rookie.
9th.
All right. I'm not talking to any of you guys
I'm not working tomorrow, so I'm not, if it ends up going 4.5.
I just can't wait to come in here every day and see Mr. Chernoff and have him tell me how, we're good. On-time departure. Pouring rain out. Don't worry about it.
The good news about Washington is rarely do they delay games for the threat of a rain delay. So I just want the listeners to know, and this is part of App Day, that when you have the app, you get the rain delay show with it, just in case there's bad weather somewhere.
Yeah. I can't wait for that.
I think you guys, I know you guys have that attitude. You guys do such a great rain delay show, though.
Leroy the boy.
It is. There's Leroy and Stan the man.
And brother.
And
still rain.
The oldest listeners, which we love. And we always tell people if you're over 80, you get to the front of the line on the calls.
So, they do. They really do. Or if you call internationally as well. Domino and I, Wiley, we did a rain delay show a couple of years ago where we said, let's see how far away we can get the furthest call. We had someone call from Australia. It was like noon the next day.
I told Hoyt today we should break out one of the great callers, Sal, from the rain delay show. And that should be our Braves opening day eve call every year, or the day before we get Sal to break down how you get to first base.
How many ways?
It's your pal, Sal.
What was it, 68 ways to get to first base? Is that what it was? I lost track.
Is that the number?
Something like that.
So for those who don't know,
Pal or is this Sal?
Oh, here we go.
No, it's your pal, Sal.
So Sal, for those who don't know, for the new listeners, was a guy who would call the rain delay show, and he was going to run through every potential way you could get on first base.
Mm-hmm.
Eric is up next. Eric, save us.
No, it's still Sal.
There he is, Sal. I'm telling you. That guy Sal was great. He's full of energy, and it was educational.
And you know who was the consummate pro throughout the whole thing was our buddy Ben Ingram.
Oh, no question.
The ultimate pro throughout the course of that rain delay show.
When are we having a meet and greet face-to-face with Sal?
I think we do it just about every week at about 1:55 in the afternoon. I usually have it.
Station usually doesn't let Sal out very much for liability purposes if they can help it.
I believe the station actually told Sal it can never be done again.
Right. I think
That's what I heard.
The phrasing was, don't ever do it again.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm sure we'll hear from Stan the man and
Leroy the boy.
Leroy the boy and all of our cast of characters. How excited are you for opening day 2023?
I always love it, man. It is like cliched, and it's kids, but the night before or the morning of. Now, it's also nicer when you realize your team is championship good.
Yes.
Now, I grew up in Atlanta, and there are plenty of mornings on the opening day of baseball where I had no thoughts of championship. I just thought, Dale Murphy's going to be in the lineup. that was enough for me. Or, is Zane Smith really opening day starter? How many times is Rick Mailer going to get the ball on opening day? Those were thoughts of an 80s kid in Atlanta. So it's a little more juice.
Not like the young guys like Wiley who have they've been winning their whole life.
Well, there was 2015. That happened. That was
don't
sad.
go back to that.
2015. How about like from the time I'm 8 until the time I'm 13? I'm like, do teams actually win in baseball? It was some of the worst stuff you'd ever. But we would go. Oh, there's Murph and there's Bob Horner, and all right, it was enough to keep you entertained.
Do you ever feel like you need to go on a speaking tour to kids in Oakland or Colorado? I mean, they could probably use some of your.
There is nothing worse than being in a town where your team is bad because baseball is the longest season of all of them. And then, you look up, you're like, oh, it's May. We still have 4.5 months of being bad. That sucks.
Yeah. Did you guys see, Wiley, you're not allowed to answer this. I'll give it to you, Matt. Did you see who the opening day starter for the Oakland Athletics is this year?
We talked about it last week on the show. He is, let's say, not exactly a veteran of Oakland.
Kyle Muller, former Brave, is going to get the nod. So to your point, I think you look at a lot of markets where, hope springs eternal.
Right.
And we talked about it earlier. No one thought the Baltimore Orioles were going to be a contender last year, but they came out of nowhere. But that doesn't happen very often.
No. Baseball's the one sport where chalk holds more than anything else. And the NBA is a close second, but you can have a surprise there where somebody who wasn't projected to be great is in the middle of the playoff pack. In baseball, on a 162-game basis, not that 60-game thing where the Marlins made the playoffs at 30-32. I mean, 162 tells you the truth most years.
You cannot hide.
Yeah.
You cannot hide. And I think, like you said, the Angels maybe outside chance. I'm not sure if I'd buy it, but you could kind of talk your way into that. Maybe the Rangers with the amount of money they've spent. But the bottom line is for a team like Oakland or Colorado, I mean, you can't even tilt your head and squint and say, well, maybe if these things.
So let me ask you, here's the one. I don't know if any of these are the right answer. Braves, Mets, Phillies. If you had to pick one that disappoints greatly, who is it?
I'm going to go Phillies just because I think they take a step back from the World Series run. Now, look, I'll say this. I think they overperformed a year ago. Nobody expected them to go all the way and win the National League. But I do think with Harper being a question mark, how long is he going to be out? You lose Rhys Hoskins. What's the back 4 and 5 of the rotation? I think the Phillies, coming off what they did a year ago, I think they could be a disappointing team this year.
I agree wholeheartedly with you. And it was mid-September when they came down here to Atlanta, and Sir Anthony Dominguez and Jose Alvarado, absolutely terrible. Terrible. And those are the guys they rode a month later to the postseason. Bullpen is volatile, and to me, as exciting as the stuff is that Alvarado has and as good as he was in October, same for Dominguez, to me, over the course of the last couple of years, there's more bad than good with both those guys.
I would agree that the Trey Turner signing is going to raise expectations.
Yes.
I love Trey. Trey's phenomenal. I do think there's some parts of that club that it was 87 wins last year, and I'm not going to call it a magic carpet ride. They earned their way to the World Series. I just don't know if that was real. That I think that they're going to go from 87 to 92 or 94. I could see them going back to 82 or 83.
Vegas has them at 88.5. So Vegas is thinking along the lines you do. Look at that. We all agree about something. That's got to be a first.
Well, it's frightening as well.
That's exactly right. What's coming up on the big program this afternoon?
So our legal eagle, Bruce Hagan, is on the other side to talk about all things of the legal variety in the sports world. It's a Wednesday, which means our agent to the stars, Hadley Engelhardt, will join. We'll talk about the Falcons' newest big signing, and of course, it is Braves Baseball Eve. One more sleep till the fun begins.
And Wiley, the next time we do this show, we'll be 6 games in to the regular season. Hard to believe that next time we get together next Thursday, we'll get bumped back a day with day baseball. But we'll be 6 games into this thing already.
Jared Schuster and Dylan Dodd will be big leaguers.
There you go.
Magic number will be down to 150.
That's right. We'll start doing math early this season. All right, that's going to do it for the Braves Clubhouse Report. For Wiley Ballard, I'm Kevin McAlpin. We will talk to you tomorrow as we get you set for Braves baseball right here on The Fan.